So this is one of my apiaries in Sag Harbor. Beautiful. I get asked this question all the time. How are the bees? And that's what we're going to talk about today, locally, nationally, and globally. Just a little bit about me. I manage over 100 colonies. I do talks all over the country. I've presented original research up at Apimundia in Canada. Apimundia is the international conference of bees, and every year it's in a different country. I presented in Canada. This year it's going to be in Chile. Honeybees here we have 4 seasons. Honeybees do not hibernate. They basically stay inside and huddle together and detach their wings and shiver their muscles to keep each other warm. And bees and people have been together forever. We've got 7,500-year-old cave paintings that show the relationship between bees and people. And here's some early female settlers checking their honeybee comb. That's probably past 1850 or so, because they're using these removable frames that were developed in 1850 by Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth from Pennsylvania. So we still use the same Langstroth hive today. And honeybees are not native to North America. They were brought over on a ship in 1622. We did not know about pollination back then. So again, the use of the bees was for honey, for beeswax, which was used as a form of currency, basically, back in Egyptian times. So this will, I thought, was very important. I wanted to show that bees were here. And I looked through the whole East Hampton town records. I have it all on a disc, hundreds of years. And I found no mention of bees except for Mr. Honey, who was the truant officer in the town of East Hampton. So I dug deeper, and the East Hampton librarian helped me to find this will. And what's important is that in this will, he left, Mr. Dayton left the beehives to his son. And that tells you how important they were to people, that it wasn't just like a chair that they didn't care about. It was something really, really important to them to leave it into their will. So this is a little bit old, this 2017, but it's the same news today. We've been hearing, insect apocalypse, honeybee colony collapse. We're losing half of our bees, just about, or 48 to 52%. The last couple of years in America, we are losing our bees. They're dying. So are lots of the other insects. We've got the monarchs, about a 90% decline. It's just 41% of all bugs are facing extinction, and that's a problem. They're kind of the bellwether of the environment. If we're killing or all the tiny little creatures are dying, what's going on in the environment that's causing it? We even have bees for the first time a few years ago being placed on the endangered species listing. The rationale behind placing a species on the endangered species listing is to get it off. So we have to do things. We don't put a species on and let it sit there. We do things to take it off of that listing. We try to delist it. How do we stop the rusty-patched bumblebee from going totally extinct? We'd have to stop our land use practices. We'd have to give them habitat. We'd have to stop pesticides. We'd have to give them forage. We're not really doing anything to reverse the listing of the rusty-patched bumblebee. And I think, about 95% of them are gone. Honeybees are in decline, and they have a lot of different problems. Pests and disease. The number one issue facing honeybees globally is a pest called the varroa mite. It came from China in 1988-ish. It was found here in America, and it gives the bees dozens of viruses in addition to weakening them from, it'd be like a tick the size of a basketball on you. Now imagine a tick that size sucking on what would be the liver of you. They suck on the fat bodies of the bees, and they're weakening the bees so that maybe they get a dose of a pesticide that normally wouldn't really harm them too much, but they're weak, or maybe they don't have adequate nutrition that normally that wouldn't really bother them too much, but they're weak and they're sick, so they're dying. And the problem with the mites is that it'd be like a tick. We take the mites off the bees. We treat the bees. I use organic acids. I'm an organic beekeeper. So I take the mites off, but I'm doing nothing for the viruses. So if I take all the ticks off of everyone, shove you all in a little room for the whole winter, and just say that Lyme disease is transmissible amongst each other, that's what's happening with the bees. And they are passing the viruses amongst themselves, in addition to getting the viruses given to them by the mites. So that's a problem. Climate change is a big issue because just think about if the flowers are blooming, but it's too cold for the bees to fly yet, they're going to miss that bloom. They're going to miss the opportunity to get that food. In addition to too much rain, the bees don't fly. It washes out the nectar. Not enough rain, there's no nectar. Just too many storms, high temperatures, low temperatures. It's wreaking havoc on a lot of our insect population. A lot of pollution. Bees are susceptible to different pollutants. Pollution for the bees could be pesticides. Competition amongst resources if they don't have enough food in an area. Like I had someone offer me a farm and they was like, oh, you could put 1,000 beehives there. No, I can't, because there's only so much food in the area. Bees only fly 3 to 5 miles. So if they run out of food in that certain area, everyone suffers. Predators, we have a queen bee that goes out to get mated once in her life. If she gets eaten by a bird or hit by a car, that colony is doomed. And then, of course, land management, what we're doing on our own properties and what our local governments and local businesses are doing on their properties. And also research. We need money and research for different things to treat the bees with and different viruses and things like that. And we've got more things coming around the corner to harm bees, more invasive species that we have to be worried about. This shows the losses each year through the Bee Informed Partnership, and they've been doing a survey for since 2008. And so over 40%. Last year was 52, and this year is 48% that we're losing our bees. Imagine if we're losing that many dogs or cows or chickens or birds or anything. The people would be rising up. But beekeepers are pretty good at replacing our losses, but it's very hard and frustrating. This also shows, the departure from normal temperatures. So the red, lower temperatures and higher temperatures here. This is the use of neonicotinoids, which is a new class of pesticides, over a decade now. And the neonicotinoids, they treat the seed, and the entire plant now is toxic. The leaves, the flowers, the stem, the pollen, the neck, everything. The fruit is all toxic. So, and it lasts for a very, very, very long time in the environment. So it kind of never goes away. That's a problem. It disorients the bees, and they tend to have disappeared along with the introduction of this new class of chemicals. Honeybees are living shorter lives. They only live about 40, 45, 50 days. In the summertime, winter bees can live up to 9 months, but that's a whole different story. We kind of know what happens with pesticides, but what we don't know are the synergistic effects. When we take a pesticide and a fungicide, sometimes these fungicides that we use on our almonds, apples, things like that, are benign to the bee. You could feed it to the larva and nothing really is going to happen. But when you mix it with certain classes of pesticides, it makes that pesticides 1,000 times more toxic to the bees. So that's a problem. We don't know the effects, even amongst ourselves. Here in Suffolk County, we've got about 120 pesticide-related chemicals in our groundwater. Who's studying the effects of when we're drinking all of these things together? So here locally, right now, we are in swarm season. We are in our nectar flow. We have one nectar flow here on Long Island, one major nectar flow. It typically starts around May 15th to July 15th, coincides with swarm season. We have a minor nectar flow in the summertime, but not enough to really worry about harvesting. We leave that nectar for the bees. So this is a swarm of honeybees in flight, could be 30, 40, 50,000 individuals. You will see a swarm land, and this is what you'll see. Swarms are docile, they're gentle, they have nothing to protect, they have no babies, they have no home, they have no honey. So I typically just grab them. If you do see a swarm of honeybees, it's illegal to kill them here in Suffolk County. It's illegal to kill bees a swarm that moves into your walls of your home. So call a beekeeper. If you call an exterminator, the great ones will say, call a beekeeper, so you could skip that step. And we come and we take them, we test them for mites, put them in a new hive, and feed them and hope that they make it through the winter. You can find lists on the Long Island Beekeepers Club website for the Long Island folks, and also the Dice Honeybee Lab. If you're anywhere in New York State, they have lists by counties of people that not only remove swarms, but people that do cutouts, which I do as well, where we remove bees from inside of structures. Bees don't dig a hole to get into your home. They find a hole. So go around your house and caulk everything that you could find 1/8 of an inch or larger. Caulk, screen, duct tape, whatever you got, so you don't have to call me because it costs you to remove the bees. And you don't want to do that. So do some preventative maintenance. Also, you might not get yellow jackets and hornets and things like that. Speaking of them, do you have bees or do you have something else? The big difference between the honeybees and bumblebees and other wasps and hornets is that these are fuzzy and cute and nice, and these are not. They are shiny, typically with this cinched-in little waist, very striking colors, where the honeybees are more of a mellow orange, brown, kind of yellowy kind of coloring. Honeybees come in like all different colors, all different shades. And if you see the nest, these are not honeybees. Do not go up to this. This is a hornet nest. Bold-faced hornets, European hornets. We don't have the killer hornets here. I don't think we ever will, hopefully. So just be very careful with these guys. They are aggressive. They come after you. You can leave them. You can call an exterminator, but just to see the difference. If you see the nest, it is not a honeybee nest, usually. Only 20% of swarms will make it on their own, unmanaged in the wild, so that's not good. And if you just leave it and they'll go away, they might have landed on your tree because they're planning to move into your soffit. So you don't want to just leave them. You want to take a picture, take a video, get online, find the phone numbers, and call the beekeepers until someone doesn't tell you to just leave them until someone comes and helps you. Why do we care about honeybees? Well, it's not about the honey anymore. We know that they give us honey. They give us wax. They give us bee venom, other things, and medicine. But they're making our food, and they're making a lot of it. Honeybees, because of the sheer numbers, so a colony of honeybees could have 60, 70,000 individuals, whereas a colony of bumblebees could have 50 or 500. So just by the sheer number is why in agriculture we're using these bees. They're easy to transport in their hives, whereas bumblebees have a little nest in the ground, typically little tiny honey pots where they keep their honey in. They can be used for pollination, but just they don't do the amount of work that we need here to provide our food. And we would be able to have more food production, although we do throw away about half of the food that we make here in America, if we had more pollinators. Maybe native pollinators would even be good. They're finding that if we put honeybee colonies on crops such as soy, that it increases the yield. Now, soy doesn't require pollination, but when we add bees to the mix, it tends to increase the yield. So it does help in areas where they aren't even really needed. This image shows the difference between with bees and without bees. We would have a very expensive and a very boring and not so nutritious food supply. Now, if you've ever gotten a cucumber or an apple that's misshapen or looks funny, or watermelon that's kind of tasteless, it hasn't been properly pollinated. So an apple requires at least 3 visits to the flower by bees to get fully pollinated. So you could get fruit that's not fully pollinated that, like I said, doesn't taste as great or looks kind of funny. And that's how you could tell that they weren't fully pollinated. We have to import bees into New York each year in order to pollinate our crops, our apples. We just don't have enough bees in New York. So our pollinators and our beekeepers are doing a lot of work moving the bees around the country. And this image shows how, where the bees are going and how they're moved. Every year in February, we move about 2.8 million honeybee colonies over to pollinate the almonds. I've been there twice. It is magnificent. 1 million acres in bloom of almond trees that smells delightful with 2 million honeybee colonies scattered throughout that area. It's amazing, but it's also kind of odd because 2.8 million colonies are needed and we only have about 2.8 million colonies in the country. These little dots show that states that have lost over 50% of their bees. So that's a problem too. So we are shipping our bees all across the country, and also with it could be the spread of disease, stress on the bees. Bees have PTSD. Bees also dream. Bees have facial recognition. So, I mean, there's a lot to these little creatures that more than we even know. This shows where all of our bees live in the country. And as you can imagine, because we are, needing so many bees in California, that we're shipping all the bees over there. We are struggling. Honeybee keepers, there's a saying in beekeeping, if you want to make $1 million, start with 2. We're just pouring money into the business and, not getting a lot of help from the government. The Farm Bill wasn't very friendly to the beekeepers. So try to keep supporting beekeepers, attending talks, buy local honey. If you have money to donate to research, I can help direct you to different organizations that can help you with that. This is that same organization, a little different chart that shows the annual loss of this year. Just came in about a week ago, and it was, it's like 56%. This is the annual loss in the pink. The yellow is the summer loss, and the blue is the winter loss. So we are experiencing some of this shows the highest summer loss ever recorded. And so, nothing is getting better with the bees. It's just getting worse. So that's a problem. The one thing, commercial beekeepers, and I laugh a little bit because we get a little bit mad at backyard beekeepers that are not treating their bees for mites and are not feeding their bees. It'd be like you have a dog and now your dog died and you don't understand because the dog was covered in fleas and ticks and you didn't do anything to address that, and you didn't feed the dog because, it could just take care of itself. I hear that all the time. I just want to be natural. I just want them, they're wild, right? They just do what they do. No, that was 50 years ago. They just do what they do. When we had a different environment, we had different pesticides. We did not have the varroa mite. Our grandfathers had a very easy time. Put the bees in the box and you go get some honey in a couple months. We do not have that anymore. I'm treating my bees at least 4 times a year with organic acids. When you are keeping bees, you need time, but the timing is more important of what you do in those beehives. If you miss certain milestones or certain tasks, it's over. You can't go back. But the one thing that all of the backyard, sideline, and commercials agree with is what is causing all these problems with the bees is the varroa mite. We're all in agreement on that, which is a good thing. Here it is, the star of the show, the varroa mite. And this poor little bee has what's called the deformed wing virus. It comes out of its cell when it's born with this virus. It will never fly. It'll only live I see this kind of rarely in my beehives, but I did see once where there was like 2 or 3 of them, and they were kind of segregated on the outside frame. Usually the bees are all like in the middle of the hive doing all their bee things, but these little sick bees were probably pushed out. Typically they'll throw them out on the ground. But yeah, so here they are parasiticizing the larva pre-birth, and here they are on an adult bee, and here is the varroa mite. And typically they go underneath. So people will say well, I didn't see any mites. Well, unless you're picking up the bee and looking where the fat bodies are underneath on the abdomen, you're not really going to see them unless you are totally infested. The other thing is that in times of brooding, when the bees have brood, about 80 to 90% of the mites are under the brood cappings. So you wouldn't see them running around because they're out of your sight. So the only way to know that you have mites is to test. If we see right here, every honeybee colony in the US and Canada has varroa mites or will, period. So you better be treating, and not once in August. You need to treat throughout the season. Again, the varroa mite is the number 1 reason for colony losses, and why new beekeepers and experienced beekeepers are choosing to not treat their bees. They don't know. I mean, people say, my bees died. I'm like, did you treat them? I get, wait, for what? Treat what? Like, they just don't know. There's not enough education out here in particular for beekeepers, but you have bees, you have mites, and I'll tell people, you didn't treat your bees. And so what happens is, we get what's called mite bombs. And so your bees explode during the spring, and they're full of mites, but they're still doing pretty good. And they're gathering nectar, and they're turning it into honey, and they end up collapsing. And this kind of explains why. So this is the population of the bees, and this is, say, January, February, March, April, May, June. And all the while, the mites are a little bit behind, but they're growing. And now, so we're in June, the summer solstice, that was the peak of the bees' production, and they start going down. But they're going down in numbers while the mites continue to increase. And now is when your colony is going to collapse and die. And as it's collapsing, my treated bees, who are healthy and happy, are going to rob your bees, and they're going to take your honey back to my hive, because the weakened hive cannot protect itself. They're going to take the honey back to my hive, but they also bring back the mites. That's a problem. So now I've done all my work. I've treated 3 or 4 times, and now I have mites again. And it's very maddening. How do we test for mites? There's a couple of different ways, but looking, isn't going to do it. This is a drone brood. Mites are drawn to the drone. The drones are the males. The male honeybee takes a few days longer to emerge from its cell. So somehow the mite knows that, so they have more time to reproduce within that cell. So drone brood is a good thing to look through to see if you've got mites. This is a severe infestation. This is one of the best, I think, ways of monitoring your mite load, because most of the mites are under the brood capping, and most of those mites are in the drone brood. So you can take a quick peek. You see any mites in there, it's time to treat. We can do a test with an alcohol wash where we're actually washing the mites off of the bees. We could do a powdered sugar roll. This is a sticky board where we're just looking at this board on the bottom of the colony. And this is just looking with your eyes. This is the Formic Pro, another organic acid that I use. Different times of year. This penetrates the brood cappings, so it kills the mites under the brood cappings. The other one does not. The oxalic acid sublimation is like a flea bath, basically. It takes the mites off of the phoretic mites off the outside of the bees. So different times of the year, we use different treatments to kill the enemy where we know that they're living at the time. But we have help. So these are free resources from the Honeybee Health Coalition, Tools for Varroa Management. It's a 100 or so page PDF. Practices, best management practices for hive health. Lots of good resources. Please don't, go to B-Man Joe or, someone like the backyard guy. Those are the guys you see without the mask and doing things improperly. And it's dangerous for new beekeepers to not follow the right beekeepers. So I would say go to Cornell, University Extension sites. I'm a certified master beekeeper. Follow us, ask us questions. I'm not saying that other people don't know what they're talking about, but sometimes you can get some misinformation and could cost you some beehives. Again, we do have help. The Beltsville Bee Lab, you can send bees down if you don't know what's going on within your beehive. It's free. The National Honey Board has, if you go onto honey.com and, cycle your way through the site, you'll find, I would say, dozens of different resources for testing your honey for different pesticides or sugars or pollens or pesticide analysis, disease analysis. So we do have help, and we've got the New York State apiculturist. She actually lives here on Long Island, and she's a very nice lady, and always willing to help and talk. What we do have here in New York new is beekeeper registration. You don't have to become a registered with the state, but if you sell bees, you do. The good thing and the impetus behind the beekeeper registration is for the foul brood transmission and detection. And if I had foul brood in my hive and we were all beekeepers and we were all registered, the state would come and inspect your beehives within maybe 5-mile radius of mine. so that we could stop the spread of that disease. So that's the big impetus behind this registration, is to know where all the bees are so that we can help stop the spread of any kind of suspected communicable disease like that. So last year, Canada lost 90% of their bees, 90%. Now we're losing 50, 52, 48, and we think that's bad, 90%. Now the problem with that is that Canada has open borders. They import bees from all over the world. We have closed borders. We don't, because of different diseases. If Canada, I am part of the legislative committee for the American Beekeeping Federation, and we were trying to ask the American government to allow us, America, to sell our bees to Canada because we have closed borders and we're not allowed to do that. And the reason why is because we don't want Canada going to other countries and getting bees that have tropicolaps. And now tropicolaps is in Canada and North America. That's a problem. So we still haven't been allowed to sell them bees, and they are importing bees from Russia and Ukraine and everywhere else. So that's how that pathogen is perhaps going to make its way here. Australia was the only continent that did not have the varroa mite up until last year, 1 year ago. What their government is doing, rather than treating or testing or whatever, is actually euthanizing. Within a 10-mile radius, the Australian government is killing all the bees, whether they are sick or not. If you go on to Instagram and start following some of these Australian beekeepers, it's heartbreaking because they are literally going in at night, pouring gasoline on their beehives without testing them. Even if the beekeeper, I said, look, I tested, there's no mites, blah, blah, blah. And the government says, we don't care. They are literally exterminating billions of bees in Australia in order to try to stop the spread of varroa. The rest of the world is treating, except for Cuba. Very different beekeeping in Cuba. Brazil, interesting. You see honey at the store and you see it says organic. There's no such thing as organic honey unless it's from Brazil, of course. And here's why. So I'm from Brazil and you're the government of America. And I say to you, here's my honey. It's organic. And you're the government. You say, thank you for that organic honey. And now it goes on the shelf. Brazil uses more pesticides than any country in the world. But they're the only place that has organic honey. It's not organic honey. It's that our government are idiots that listen to Brazil that says, okay, your honey's organic. Honeybees will travel 3 to 5 miles and go wherever they want to go. I cannot say that my honey is organic. I have sent my honey out to laboratories, spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars, tested for a 400-panel pesticide analysis, and tested for glyphosate. 2 separate tests come up 0. I still can't say that my honey is organic. Now, that was a snapshot in time. That was a batch of honey at one specific time from one place. We're not doing this with Brazilian honey. So people come to me and they say, I only buy organic honey, or I only buy Manuka honey. Manuka honey. The largest Manuka honey producer on the planet was put in jail for honey laundering. We can help in our own yards. If we plant one tree, one flowering tree will give us as much forage for the bees and other wildlife as a whole acre of wildflowers. So it's kind of easy for you to plant a tree or some nice bushes than maybe try to plant a whole acre of flowers. So think about that, planting trees and shrubs. And also bees need water. So this is something that everyone can do right now in their backyard, is they can put up a little bee bath. You put some shells or rocks or corks or anything in any kind of a shallow bowl or dish. This is one of those dog waterers, and you will have lots of bees. Just put it in a spot, like not at your outdoor table, because the bees will keep coming and coming to it. So just put it in a little out of the way area and, refill it every now and then. A honeybee colony can use a whole gallon of water a day in the summer, to not only to consume, they keep their hive cool, and they need it for brood rearing, and also bees have to dilute the honey in order to consume it. Don't shear the privet until it's done blooming. So simple. Don't shear the privet. If I go on NPR, I get interviewed, I try to get that point across. It just is a buffet for all the pollinators, bees, birds, butterflies, you name it. Shear the privet July 15th, not May 15th, for Memorial Day to look neat and tidy. When you do use pesticides, target. Don't spray everything and say, oh, I'm spraying for ticks. Ticks don't live in the trees. They don't live in the bushes. Target what you're trying to kill. Plant a variety of things that bloom all year round, and you will be helping the bees. And that's it. I think we're done.